It was 11:47 at night when the call came through. Dora Reyes had just pulled off US Route 60, somewhere between the Arizona desert and the edge of everything she thought she understood about the world. The engine of her motorcycle was still clicking, cooling down after a long stretch through the Superstition Mountains. The air smelled like dust and creosote. The sky had more stars than most people ever get to see. She almost didn't pick up. She had been riding for 9 hours straight. Her back hurt. Her hands were stiff from gripping the bars through the wind. She had planned to stop at a motel outside of Globe, get a few hours of sleep, and be back on the road before sunrise. She had a run to lead the next morning. 17 riders from the Iron Magnolia chapter, all waiting on her word. But something made her answer. The voice on the other end was not a voice she recognized. It was small, it was shaking, and it belonged to a child. "Please," the girl said. "They're putting me in a car. I don't want to go. Please help me." Then the line went dead. Dora Reyes did not sleep that night. What followed the next few hours would test everything the Iron Magnolia Motorcycle Club had ever stood for. It would push riders to their absolute limits across some of the most unforgiving roads in the American Southwest. And it would bring a little girl back from a situation that, if things had gone just slightly different, she might never have come back from at all. This is not just a story about motorcycles. This is a story about what a group of people, mostly women, leather-jacketed, road-worn, and fiercely loyal to one another, will do when a child needs help and nobody else is coming. Stay with us, because this is going to be one of those stories you don't forget. Before we get into what happened that night, you need to understand who the Iron Magnolia is. Most people, when they think about motorcycle clubs, picture a certain image. Big guys, dark bars, a lot of growling and posturing. And look, there are clubs like that. That world exists. But Iron Magnolia is something different. It started years ago, the way most real things start. Not with a big plan or a press release, but with a moment of need and a group of people who decided to show up. Dora Reyes was one of the first. She had been riding since she was 19 years old, doing long hauls alone on roads that most people only drive in cars with the windows up and the air conditioning on. She knew the highways that nobody talks about, the kind where you can go 40 miles without seeing another living soul, the kind where you learn fast that you are exactly as tough as you think you are, or you turn around. She didn't turn around. Over time, she started meeting other women with the same hunger, women who had found something on the road that they couldn't find anywhere else, a kind of freedom that isn't about running away. It's about going toward open air, toward the feeling that you are alive and moving, and the world is exactly as big as it actually is. They started riding together. Then they started looking out for each other. Then they started looking out for strangers. The Iron Magnolia patch, a rose with iron thorns stitched onto leather, became something people along the back roads of Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico learned to recognize. Not because the club was famous, because they were there, consistently in the places where regular help didn't always reach. They had helped a woman leave an abusive situation on State Route 89. They had given food and gas money to families stranded on Interstate 40. They had sat with elderly people at roadside diners when nobody else was around to sit with them. They were not trying to be heroes. They were just paying attention. And in a world where a lot of people have stopped paying attention, that turns out to be enough to change things. Now let's go back to that phone call. Dora stared at her phone for 30 seconds after the line went dead. One call, a child's voice, no name, no location, no follow-up. She called back. Nothing. The phone rang and rang. She pulled her map up. She had come off US Route 60 near Claypool. She was maybe 15 miles from the small town of Miami, Arizona. Not the Florida one, the one that sits in the mountains east of Phoenix, quiet and half forgotten. She had passed through there maybe 40 minutes earlier, right before the long downhill stretch. Had the child been in Miami? Had she been somewhere on that road? Had she been somewhere Dora had already passed? There was no way to know. But Dora Reyes is not the kind of person who waits for certainty before she moves. She got back on her bike. She called Marco, the road captain who rode sweep on most of their runs, as she pulled onto the highway. She kept it short. She had gotten a call from a child in distress. Possible location somewhere between Claypool and Superior, along US Route 60. She needed eyes. Marco didn't ask a lot of questions. He said he'd make calls. Within 20 minutes, the Iron Magnolia network was moving. This is something that people who have never been part of a club like this don't quite understand. When you ride together for years and when you've shared breakdowns and storms and grief and road rash and bad coffee at 2 in the morning, you develop a kind of trust that doesn't need a lot of words. You say go and people go. You say I need you and people come. 6 riders were heading toward US Route 60 from different directions within half an hour of that first call. 3 more were on standby. 2 had connections in local law enforcement and were already making quiet inquiries. 1 little girl had no idea that a small army was mobilizing for her. If you've never ridden the stretch of US Route 60 between Superior and Globe in Arizona at night, I want you to picture something for a second. It's narrow. The road carves through canyon walls that close in on both sides. Dark stone rising up like walls that someone forgot to finish. Your headlight punches a thin tunnel through the dark. The curves come at you fast, and the drop-offs on the outside of those curves are serious. We're talking hundreds of feet in some places. It's the kind of road that demands everything from you. Every cell in your body is focused. There is no room for distraction, no room for doubt, no room for fear. Dora rode it at speed, her eyes scanning every turnout, every shoulder, every dirt road that cut off into the desert. She was looking for anything. Tire tracks. A car pulled over with its lights off. A child standing alone. Behind her, 3 riders from the Tucson contingent of Iron Magnolia were coming up on State Route 77, checking the road toward Winkleman. 2 more had taken the back way, looping around through Peridot on the San Carlos Reservation, covering ground that doesn't show up on most tourist maps. They were thorough because they had learned over years of riding that the road gives up its secrets only to people who slow down enough to look. And then, 43 minutes after that first call, one of them found something. Ruby. That's what everyone calls her, though her real name is something longer and harder to say, was rolling slow on the shoulder near the turnoff for a ranch road when her headlight caught something that didn't belong. A pair of small sneakers, pink, sitting in the dirt at the edge of the road as if they had simply been set there. Ruby stopped. She got off her bike. She stood very still and listened. And from somewhere in the dark, maybe 30 feet off the road, she heard crying. Ruby has been riding with Iron Magnolia for 6 years. She is not easily shaken. She has ridden through floods on the back roads of New Mexico. She has pulled a man out of a ditch on Highway 191 in the middle of a blizzard. She's the kind of person who stays calm when everything else is falling apart. But she said later that when she walked toward that sound in the dark, her legs felt like somebody had poured lead into them. She turned on her flashlight. Sitting against the base of a large saguaro cactus, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself, was a girl who looked to be about 8 years old. She was wearing a thin dress that was wrong for the desert night air, and she was shaking. When the light hit her, she flinched. Then she looked up. "Are you the motorcycle lady?" she whispered. Ruby said she almost didn't know what to say. She crouched down, kept her distance, kept her voice soft. "What's your name, honey?" "Lily," the girl said. "I called a number. I found a phone and I called." Someone answered. Ruby called Dora immediately. Dora's voice, Ruby later said, changed in a way she had never heard before. Not panic. Dora doesn't panic, but something underneath the calm. Something raw. "I'm coming," Dora said. "Do not leave that child alone. I don't care what happens. Do not leave her." "I'm not going anywhere," Ruby said. She sat down in the dirt next to Lily. Not close enough to scare her, just close enough to be there. She didn't ask a lot of questions right away. She didn't push, she just sat, the way you sit with someone who has had the worst night of their life and needs to know that the worst part is over. After a minute or 2, Lily leaned her head against Ruby's arm. They sat like that until Dora arrived. The sound of Dora's motorcycle on that ranch road is something Ruby said she will never forget as long as she lives. It wasn't the loudest sound she'd heard, but it was the most certain one. The sound of someone coming who knows exactly where they're going and exactly what they'll do when they get there. Dora killed the engine about 50 feet out so she wouldn't startle the child. She walked the rest of the way in. When she crouched down in front of Lily, the little girl looked at her for a long moment. studied her face the way children do when they're deciding whether to trust someone, taking in the leather jacket, the worn boots, the lines around the eyes that come from years of squinting into wind and sun. "You answered," Lily said. "I answered," Dora said, "and I'm not going anywhere." What came next was a conversation that Dora has described only in pieces, because some of it is not hers to share. A child's story belongs to that child. But the broad strokes are this. Lily had been in a car with two adults she did not know well. She had heard things during the drive that frightened her. When the car stopped at a dark gas station on a side road, she had managed to slip away in the confusion. She had found a cracked old phone on the ground near a trash can, the kind that still works sometimes even without service if it catches a signal. And she had dialed the only number she could think to dial, which she had heard someone say out loud once before and had memorized the way children sometimes memorize things, without quite knowing why. That number had connected to Dora. Dora listened to all of it. She didn't rush the girl. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. The way you listen when you understand that what someone is telling you is the most important thing they have ever said. When Lily was done, Dora looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "You were very, very brave. Do you know that?" Lily shook her head. "Well, I'm telling you, what you did tonight and finding that phone, making that call, hiding somewhere safe, that was brave. That was exactly right." Lily started crying again. But this time it was different. The kind of crying that means something has finally let go. While Dora stayed with Lily, the rest of the Iron Magnolia network was working. 2 members with law enforcement contacts had already made calls. A county deputy was on his way. A social worker who worked with the club on community matters was being reached by phone. 3 more riders had positioned themselves on different access roads off US Route 60, forming a loose perimeter. Nobody was getting in or out of that area without passing at least one Iron Magnolia rider. This is the part that people who aren't part of this world sometimes struggle to understand. The club is not a vigilante group. Nobody was out there looking for trouble or trying to take the law into their own hands. What they were doing was simpler and more powerful than that. They were making sure a little girl was safe until the people whose job it was to help could get there. That's it. That's the whole thing. When the deputy's lights appeared on the road, Dora walked out to meet him. She gave him everything she had. The timeline, the location, the details she knew. What Lily had told her. Clean, clear, no drama. She had been around long enough to know that the best thing you can do in a situation like this is be precise and get out of the way. The deputy looked at her for a moment when she was done. "How many of you are out here?" he asked. "Enough," Dora said. The social worker arrived 20 minutes later. She was gentle and professional, and she and Lily took to each other immediately. Before Lily left with her, she turned around and looked at the riders gathered in a loose half circle in the desert dark. 8 women in leather, some still in their helmets, bikes scattered across the shoulder like an unlikely cavalry. Lily raised her hand in a small wave. Every single one of them waved back. Nobody talks much on the ride back after something like that. Not because there's nothing to say, but because the road has a way of holding things that words can't quite manage. They took US Route 60 west toward Apache Junction, the same road they had ridden in the dark a few hours before, now soft with early morning light just beginning to color the edges of the canyon walls. The sky was turning a deep blue, not yet dawn, but no longer night. Dora led the column. She always leads. Behind her, Ruby rode second. Behind Ruby, 6 more. There's something about being in a formation like that. Really being in it, not just physically, but in that way where your breathing and your rhythms sync up with the riders around you. That is very hard to describe to someone who has never experienced it. You are separate people on separate machines, but you are also somehow one thing moving through space. The Iron Magnolia Club has a phrase they use when someone asks them why they ride. The answer is always the same, and it's not romantic or complicated. We ride because we can, and because someone might need us to. They stopped at a diner outside of Apache Junction as the sun was coming up. A place with vinyl booths and strong coffee and a waitress who didn't blink twice at 9 women in leather, walking through the door at 5:30 in the morning. Dora ordered eggs and didn't say anything for a while. Then she looked around the table. "Good night's work," she said. That was it. No speech, no ceremony. Coffee cups clinked. Someone asked for the hot sauce. The conversation moved on to the next run, the next road, the next thing that needed doing. This is the culture of the club. You do the thing, then you get on with it. The road will always have more for you. In the days after that night, pieces of what had happened became clearer. Lily was 8 years old. She had been in a situation involving adults who were making decisions that put her directly at risk. The details of that situation belong to law enforcement, and to the family and to Lily herself, when she is old enough to decide what to do with them. What I can tell you is that the outcome, because of what happened that night on US Route 60, was as good as a bad situation can get. Lily was placed in a safe environment. The people who had put her at risk were located, and a little girl who had been terrified in the dark had made it through the night to the other side. Dora Reyes has not spoken publicly about many of the details. That's consistent with who she is. She doesn't do this for recognition. She doesn't run the Iron Magnolia Club to be on YouTube, even though, yes, some of their stories have ended up there because the road has a way of becoming something worth telling. But here's what she did say when someone asked her later how she felt about that night. She said, "I almost didn't pick up. That's the part that stays with me. I was tired. My hands hurt. I had 17 riders waiting on me. And I almost let it go to voicemail." She paused. "I'm glad I didn't." That's the whole lesson, and it's not a small one. We all have moments where someone on the other end of something, a phone call, a glance across a parking lot, a sound we almost don't let ourselves hear, needs us to not look away. Most of the time, it costs us very little to respond, and sometimes it costs a child everything if we don't. I want to take a moment here to talk about something that gets lost sometimes when people talk about motorcycle clubs in a general way. The culture of the road is one of the most misunderstood things in America. People see the leather and they assume something. They see a group of riders on Interstate 10 through Texas, and they think they know what they're looking at. They don't. What they're looking at is a tradition, a philosophy, a way of moving through the world that has been refined by generations of people who understood something that most of modern life tries to make you forget: that you are small, and the world is large, and that smallness is not a weakness. It's actually the beginning of wisdom. When you're on a motorcycle, you are exposed. There's no shell around you. There's no soundtrack you've chosen, no climate control, no algorithm deciding what you see. It's just you and the road and whatever the road decides to give you that day. Sometimes it gives you a perfect sunset over the desert on US Route 93 through Nevada. Sometimes it gives you rain so hard you can barely see. Sometimes it gives you a moment where you realize you have made it through something that should have broken you, and you didn't break. And sometimes, it gives you a moment like the one on US Route 60, where a phone rings and a child is on the other end, and every mile you have ever ridden has been, in some way, preparation for exactly this. The Iron Magnolia Club has a saying that Dora Reyes came up with a few years ago, and it's become something they put on patches and mugs and the occasional motel receipt when there's nothing else to write on. Every story has a turning point. Ours happened on the road. If you've spent any time on these highways, really spent time, not just driven through, you know exactly what that means. The Iron Magnolia Club has ridden roads that would make most people nervous just to think about. They've done the stretch of US Route 89 through the Vermilion Cliffs in northern Arizona, where the road hugs the edge of a canyon that drops away into colors you didn't know existed. They've taken the long way across the Navajo Nation on State Route 264, where the land goes on forever and the sky doubles it. They've crossed the Sonoran Desert on Interstate 8 in July. And if you've never done that, let me tell you, the heat comes up off the blacktop and hits you in waves, and the mirages on the horizon look so real that you start to wonder what's real and what isn't. They've ridden the loneliest road in America, US, Route 50 across Nevada, where the gas stations are sometimes 100 miles apart and you have to be honest with yourself about how much fuel you have left. That road has a way of telling you exactly who you are. They've taken State Route 12 through Utah, which is one of the most beautiful roads on the planet and also one of the most unforgiving, climbing and descending through slick rock country, where a mistake has consequences that don't leave room for second chances. All of these roads have shaped the people in this club. You don't ride roads like that without becoming someone. You don't come out the other side the same. And that's the thing about the Iron Magnolia riders. They are not the same as they were when they started. Every road has taken something from them and given something back. Every hard mile has added a layer to the person underneath the jacket. Dora Reyes, somewhere on US, Route 60 in the dark of a Tuesday night, answered a call from a child she didn't know. She did it because she could, because she was there, because the road had made her into exactly the person who would pick up that phone instead of letting it go. That's not luck. That's what a life on the road builds. The morning after, Dora was back on the road by 8 o'clock. She had slept maybe 3 hours. Her coffee was gas station coffee, which she drinks without complaint because she gave up complaining about gas station coffee approximately 12 years ago. Her next run was already organized. A fundraising ride up through the White Mountains on State Route 260, one of those roads where the ponderosa pines close in on both sides, and the air gets cold and clean above 6,000 feet. 17 riders were waiting. She gave the signal, and they rolled. Someone on that ride, one of the newer members, a woman named Casey who had only been patched in a few months before, asked Dora during a rest stop at Payson if she thought about it much. The night before, the phone call, the girl. Dora thought about it for a moment. "I'll think about it the rest of my life," she said. "But I don't carry it heavy, you know what I mean? It happened. We were there. She's safe. That's the end of the story, and it's the right ending." She took a sip of her coffee. "The road gives you things. You handle them and you keep moving. That's the deal." Casey nodded like she understood, even though she was still learning what it meant. She would learn. The road would teach her. It always does. There's something that happens in our culture sometimes, where we reduce people to their surface. You see a motorcycle club and you make assumptions. You see women in leather on big machines, and you put them in a box. The Iron Magnolia Club has been put in boxes plenty of times. Written off, looked past, told, sometimes not even in words, but in the way people look through you, that what they do doesn't add up to much. And then a night like that Tuesday on US Route 60 happens, and you realize that the thing people were looking past was the thing that mattered most. These women are not a brand or a concept or a feel-good story. They are real people with real miles on their bodies and real history in their hands, and a real commitment to something that most of us only think about when things go wrong. They believe that showing up is not optional, that paying attention is not optional, that when someone needs help and you have the ability to provide it, the decision to do so is not complicated, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when your hands are stiff from a 9-hour ride and you have 17 people waiting on you, and everything in your body is saying, just let it go to voicemail. They believe that the road is a teacher and that the lesson is always the same. The world is full of people who need someone to be present. Be that person. That's it. That's the whole doctrine of the Iron Magnolia Club. And on a dark highway in the Arizona desert at 11:47 at night, Dora Reyes lived it. If you're watching this and you ride, and whether it's a big cruiser on the interstate or a small bike on back roads in your own state, you already know some of what we've been talking about here. You know what the road does to you. You know what it strips away and what it builds up. You know the particular silence of being the only light on a highway in the middle of the night. And you know the particular loudness of that silence. You know what it means to be part of something. A chapter, a crew, a handful of people who would ride 100 miles in the dark because one of their own needed them to. If you're watching this and you don't ride, if motorcycles are not your world, then maybe what you're taking away from this is something simpler. Someone answered the phone. That's the whole story if you strip everything else away. Someone was tired and had 1,000 reasons to let a call go, and they answered it instead. And because of that, one small girl who was out of options had an option. Most of us are not going to be on US Route 60 in the dark when a child calls. Most of us are not going to have a network of riders to mobilize within the hour. But all of us have moments where the choice is available. Pay attention or don't. Show up or don't. Pick up or let it ring. The Iron Magnolia answer is always the same. Pick up. Dora Reyes is back on the road as she always is. The Iron Magnolia Club is still riding the same highways they've always ridden. US Route 60, State Route 89, Interstate 10, the loneliest road, the mountain road. All the roads that run through the American Southwest like veins through something living. They're still paying attention, still showing up, still doing the thing that real clubs have always done, which is taking care of their own and taking care of strangers, and understanding that those two categories are not as different as people sometimes think. Lily is safe. That's the ending. And somewhere tonight, on a road you probably can't see from wherever you're sitting, there are headlights moving through the dark, a column of riders, women in leather who have been shaped by thousands of miles into something steady and capable and fierce. Watching the road, watching out, ready if the phone rings to answer. Iron Magnolia. Every story has a turning point. Ours happen on the road. You want to know who these women really are when they're not on a motorcycle? That's the wrong question, because who they are on a motorcycle is exactly who they are everywhere else. The road doesn't give you a costume to put on and take off. It builds character. And character doesn't check out when you park the bike. Take Ruby, for instance. Before she joined Iron Magnolia, she was working double shifts at a hospital in Tucson, the kind of work where you see people at the absolute worst moments of their lives, and you have to be steady for them even when your own life is falling apart. She had been doing that for years before she ever threw a leg over a motorcycle. And when she did, and when someone at work dared her to take a riding course, and she showed up on a Tuesday morning in the parking lot of a community college, and somehow ended up on a used Honda at the end of the day with a grin she couldn't explain, she understood immediately that this was going to change things. It took her 2 years to earn her Iron Magnolia patch. She will tell you that those were 2 of the most educational years of her life. And she has a nursing degree. Not because the club made it difficult on purpose. They don't believe in hazing or posturing or making people crawl before they can stand. But because earning a patch in a real club means earning trust. It means showing up when you said you would. It means being honest when something is beyond your skill. It means being the person who stays when the temptation is to leave. Ruby stayed. She always stays. Or take a woman in the club who goes by the road name Faro, which means iron in Portuguese, and which she earned on a mountain road in New Mexico when everyone else pulled over in the rain and she kept going at exactly the pace the road required. Not faster, not slower, just right. Faro grew up outside of Albuquerque in a household where there was never quite enough money and never quite enough certainty, where the future felt like a door that was always mostly closed. She started riding because her uncle had a bike and he let her sit on it when she was 7 years old. And she never forgot the feeling of sitting up on that seat and looking out over the handlebars at the road stretching ahead and thinking, that's where I want to go. It took her until she was 24 to own her own motorcycle. The first time she rode alone on Interstate 25 south from Santa Fe, going 70 miles an hour with the Rio Grande visible off to the west and the mountains behind her. She cried inside her helmet, not because she was sad, because she had never felt so absolutely herself in her whole life. That is what the road gives. Not just to Faro, not just to the women of Iron Magnolia, to anyone who stays with it long enough to receive the gift. Then there's the question of what it means to lead. Dora Reyes has been asked many times what made her start the club and what keeps her running it. And her answer is always something that sounds simple until you sit with it. She says, I don't lead this club. The club leads itself. I just show up first. What she means by that is that leadership in the Iron Magnolia is not about being the loudest person or the most decorated or the one with the most years on the road. It's about being consistent. It's about being the person who sets the example not by talking about it, but by doing it, mile after mile after mile, until the example becomes the standard, and the standard becomes the culture, and the culture becomes something that exists even when Dora isn't in the room. Real leadership on the road works the same way. You can't fake it. The road knows. The road has a way of revealing exactly who you are, your skill, your judgment, your patience, your courage, in a way that no other environment quite replicates. There's nowhere to hide on a motorcycle. There's no conference room where you can talk your way through something that your riding hasn't earned you the right to say. The riders who have been with Dora the longest will tell you that she has saved their lives, and not always in the dramatic way. Sometimes she saved their lives by teaching them to read weather on the horizon, sometimes by showing them the right way to take a decreasing radius curve. Sometimes just by being someone who answered the phone when things went sideways, the way she answered the phone on that Tuesday night on US Route 60, when everything that the club had ever been was called upon in one sudden moment. The American Southwest has a particular relationship with its highways that is unlike anywhere else in the country. These roads were not always roads. Many of them follow paths that were traveled for thousands of years before anyone paved them. Trade routes, migration corridors, the lines between water sources in a land where water is the difference between life and everything else. The people who live here in the pueblos and the reservations and the small towns at the edge of the desert have always known that the road is not just a convenience. It is a way of being connected, a way of being alive. The Iron Magnolia Club rides these roads with that in mind. Or at least, that's how Dora has described it. In the few moments when she's willing to talk about the larger meaning of things. She has a particular feeling about State Route 264 through the Hopi Mesas, which cuts through one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in North America. She has ridden it alone and with the full club, and she says that both experiences are extraordinary in different ways. Alone, you feel the weight of everything that came before. With the club, you feel part of a thread that connects past and present in a way that is hard to articulate but impossible to ignore. She has talked about the way the light changes on US Route 89 north of Flagstaff as it approaches the Navajo Nation, how the landscape opens up and flattens out, and suddenly the sky is so large that it seems like a different sky than the one over the rest of the country. How riding into that sky feels like riding into something you were always supposed to do. She has talked about Interstate 10 through the Chihuahuan Desert, crossing from New Mexico into Texas in the late afternoon, when the sun is coming in at an angle that makes everything look like it's lit from inside. The Ocotillo, the Lechuguilla, the distant mountains going purple against the orange sky. The road gives you this, and in exchange, the road asks everything: your attention, your respect, your willingness to accept that you are, for the duration of the ride, subject to conditions you didn't create and can't entirely control. You are a guest in the landscape. Behave accordingly. The Iron Magnolia Club believes in behaving accordingly, not just on the road, but everywhere the road takes them, in the communities they pass through, in the lives they touch. When a child called from a dark roadside in the Arizona desert, the road delivered her to the right hands, because the right hands were on the road, where they have always been. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when people commit themselves to showing up,